Welcome, my friends, to the Bob and Brad podcast. My name is Mike Keenitz, and today I'm interviewing physical therapist Sarah Haag. She is an expert in urinary incontinence and bladder control. She is also the part owner in Entropy Physiotherapy and Wellness and the author of the book Understanding and Treating Incontinence. So, without further ado, here is Sarah. So, how can someone manage their urinary incontinence on a daily basis?
Great question. So again, part of it's going to depend on the type of incontinence that they have. And one of the things that you'll see on the television is that to just manage it with continence pads, right? So you could buy a pad, put it in there. It'll just catch the urine. And I will say, thank goodness those exist. There are people who, like, if that helps you stay active, if that helps you get out of the house, these are great things. But unfortunately, I think too often, as I would say women in particular, shrug their shoulders, go to the store and buy some, and really don't look at the other things that they might be able to change to improve or eliminate their incontinence. So some of the things that you can do is, one, exercise. So we already talked a little bit about pelvic floor exercises in general, but also just being fit reduces your risk and can reduce your incontinence. So being a healthy weight, having good cardiovascular fitness, all of these are things that can help lower your risk or lower the incidence of urinary incontinence. And then some other things, and I actually already mentioned it a little bit, is managing constipation. So having good bladder and bowel habits, making sure that bowel is emptying well, can actually improve bladder function. Because we don't think about our bowel and our bladder being that close to each other, but if we look inside, they are very close to each other. And if we do have constipation, say in our rectum, it can kind of crowd the bladder and make it more likely to leak and a little bit more irritable. Smoking is not good for much, and it is really not good for our bladders. Two reasons. One, it does increase your risk of bladder cancer, but also the coughing. So our pelvic floor, again, is just like any other muscle. And when we cough, we tend to stress the pelvic floor. And so if you cough once or twice, we should absolutely be able to stay continent. But if we're coughing all the time, those muscles definitely fatigue, and we're going to increase the likelihood that we're going to have incontinence. Looking at diet. So like I said, there are some things that irritate some people's bladders. But before you give up all the things you love in life and drink only water, I always recommend do a voiding log, even if it's on your own, to go, whoa, I didn't drink any plain water today. And every time I had that carbonated water, I had to go to the bathroom really bad. So sometimes people can figure this out on their own. It's not a secret for healthcare providers. You know your bodies as well as better than anyone else. And then behavior. So sometimes when I bring up, well, we might have to look at, like changing some behaviors, people can get a little bit like, oh, what are we going to do? But when people have experienced incontinence or are concerned that they are going to be incontinent, they sometimes change their behaviors, like, well, at one extreme, not leaving the house ever, but other times going to the bathroom just in case. So they'll go out for a day, but they will know where all the bathrooms are, and they will hit every one along the way just in case. That can start. So I do explain it this way. It can make our bladder a little lazy. So our bladder is supposed to be able to fill up and hold like 400 to 600 milliliters of fluid, right? So that's a couple of cups. But if every time it gets this full, I go and empty it, my perception and my understanding of what's happening in my bladder can shift a little bit and go like, oh, I can empty now. And it'll actually prefer to empty sooner and more often rather than let it fill all the way up. So we're actually training ourselves to go to the bathroom more often. And so then we need to look at that and say, okay, can we start lengthening the trips between the bathroom? Because really, when we're looking at norms, so I don't want anyone to get super nervous if they ever go more than this, really we're looking at just getting up 0 to 1 time a night if you're 65 or under, and 1 to 2 times a night if you're 65 or over. And during the day, we're looking at, well, actually, over a 24-hour period, we're looking at just 6 to 7 times to the bathroom a day to urinate. And, I've had patients where they go 30 times a day. Okay, we need to take a look at that and figure out, what do we need to do? Is it changing your fluid intake? Is it using some sort of distraction? Is it a breathing exercise? What do we need to do so that you can stay out of the bathroom longer and stay dry? I think probably, if I could, like, just the one thing is, you asked about managing it. But, one of the questions was, can urinary incontinence be cured or only managed? And ultimately, urinary incontinence can be resolved, meaning go away completely, for some people. And I think that it's fair to have that expectation. But kind of like a lot of areas of our health, we have to do things to take care of ourselves to stay healthy. And I think if we do that, there are many people who can be, you want to call it, cured of urinary incontinence.
Sure. I'm sure it's a long process, but if you stick to it, these things can correct themselves over time. All right.
And sometimes I was going to say, just real quick, sometimes it's not as long as people think it'll take. Sometimes small changes can make a huge difference. So it's not always a huge mountain to climb. Sometimes it's just a tiny little change, and there you go.